So this is the Art Society digital art essay. Probably going to want some nice music to introduce, set the mood. The Digital Art Problem, a Stratford Art Society essay by Scott Jessup. Hi, you're with Scott. I always do the same intro to my homemade media, so it's midnight, it's always midnight. Yeah. This is an essay that I wrote and I'm reading out loud to create a podcast. I'm sat in my kitchen, not a recording studio, and I'm reading the piece from my laptop. I'm a member of my local art society. I really enjoy it because I'm enthusiastic and passionate about art and culture. We're having issues making decisions with regard to digital art. For the sake of understanding, when we talk about digital art, the society is generally referring to images constructed using software tools. We have an exhibition each summer, and whilst we're in agreement that digitally produced works are accepted as art, we have a new problem. We accept physical submissions for the exhibition, and a committee decides on the final selection to be exhibited. This is a logistical issue as we have limited space. We currently set maximum sizes for submissions to ensure that we can exhibit a wide range of works created by our society members. We recently added a sculpture area as we recognise the variety of art produced by our members, so the issue of how to display digital art has been raised. Should we use a screen? It seems quite logical to suggest that we have a big screen to display the digital art. There's a further problem. We sell the works at the exhibition. The concept of the original has been raised with regard to digital art. I suggested digital art could be printed out and displayed alongside the physical works in a similar way to a painting. The idea that a printout would be a mere copy and not the original was raised, and the implication is that our exhibition should feature original works, not prints or copies, in much the same way we display original painted works, not prints. I decided to do some research and to get to the bottom of this muddy puddle of ideas, to try and find some truth so we can, as a society, determine what's the best way to proceed. We want to display digital art, and I appreciate we want to stay true to the values of original creative works. So this is an essay that I wrote for the consideration of the Art Society, but I feel it has value, and so I'm recording it as a podcast to enable it to reach a wider audience and to make it more accessible to the members of the society, some of whom may prefer to listen to this podcast rather than read 10,000 words. This essay began as a way for me to try and define my thinking, and before I knew it, I'd written 10,000 words. The subject of art and what is art is so diverse and nuanced, the answers so philosophical and ephemeral, we might never settle on an answer, but I intend to describe some of the important factors when considering digital art before making my proposals for the committee to consider. So this is where it really starts. When discussing digital art, it's important to look at this from two perspectives. The meta perspective will discuss the big, overarching concepts. What is digital? What is an art? What is an object? Why produce an object? These concepts are important to every artist and to our society as a whole. They transcend digital art production, and the same difficult ideas have been wrestled with by artists way before the advent of the computer. Sculptors have had problems differentiating and defining their originals and unique pieces from their repeatable castings for thousands of years. The more close-up perspective looks at digital art and our problem displaying it. This is specific to our society and our summer exhibition, but it also overlaps into generalities regarding the display of digital artworks. This is only understandable if we fully discuss and understand the meta-concepts. And I warn you now, this is a long and philosophical piece. I can't pretend to have the definitive answers. I can only offer opinions, sourced through research and perpetuated by reputable scholars and thinkers. I hope I reference sound ideas and concepts. I believe part of the beauty of art is that there's not a box for everything to be kept in. Lines are blurred and broken, and often the final understanding is built from a framework of negative space. In some cases, it's easier to say what something is not than to prove what it is. So firstly, what's digital? So here's a quote. It's from the dictionary. Every time I use a quote in this essay, in the written format, you can clearly see because it's got speech marks around it, and I've left the website reference. But for this podcast, every time I quote something from someone else's work, I'm just going to say, here's a quote. And then at the end, I'll reference where it's sourced from. So now that we've set that precedent, here's a quote. Digital, adjective. Of signals or data expressed as a series of the digits 0 and 1, typically represented by values of a physical quality, such as voltage or magnetic polarization. The dictionary. We understand the term digital art to encompass any form of artwork that's constructed using, at some stage, a process of digitization in the construction. Here's a quote. Digitization, noun. The conversion of text, pictures, or sound into a digital form that can be processed by a computer. The dictionary again. So we understand that the element that's digital is defined by the computer. For a computer to read, process, store, and recall information, it encodes it into a series of zeros and ones. These values are physically created and stored in computer memory. Here's a quote. At any instant in time, a file might have a size, normally expressed as a number of bytes, that indicates how much storage is associated with the file. In most modern operating systems, the size can be any non-negative whole number of bytes up to a system limit. Many older operating systems kept track only of the number of blocks or tracks occupied by a file on a physical storage device. Wikipedia. So, there's a physical element to the file. On the hard disk, the data is physically created. This data is then read by the computer, and a production of the instruction is created. Here's a quote. A hard drive stores data on a series of spinning magnetic disks called platters. There's an actuator arm with read-write heads attached to it. This arm positions the read-write heads over the correct area of the drive to read or write information. Solid-state drives are usually called that specifically because they don't rely on moving parts or spinning disks. Instead, data is saved to a pool of NAND flash. NAND itself is made up of what are called floating gate transistors. Unlike the transistor designs used in DRAM, which must be refreshed multiple times per second, NAND flash is designed to retain its charge state, even when not powered up. This makes NAND a type of non-volatile memory. That was from extremetech.com. ExtremeTech explains how do SSDs work. Bit complicated, but every time you view a file on a computer, you're looking at a brand new production, created following a code or plan that physically exists. If you want to own the original copy of a piece of digital media, the closest you can get is to hold the drive on which the data is written. If you were to try and remove this data physically, it would be near impossible. It would corrupt the drive. Each binary data element is stored on the drive, and our file is made up of multiple values, often recorded in various locations on the drive. The data is not observable by the human eye in its physical form. The bytes are not literally written lines of zeros and ones. They're a variation on a state, like a switch. The computer sees the difference in states recorded in tiny sequences on a disk as two variables, 1 and 0, on or off, true or untrue. If you had a picture you drew on a computer with software saved as a file, you can make various physical productions of this data. For example, you could print the binary code as a series of ones and zeros. Most routinely, however, when you open a file, you ask the computer to create a production for you and to display it on a screen as the computer translates the information stored on the drive from zeros and ones, true, untrue values, into coloured pixels. The display screens have various capabilities, and the computer informs the pixels, individual electronic mosaic tiles, which colour they should present. You could also print the image. This is a very similar process to displaying it on a screen. Another brand new production. Not a reproduction, but a brand new production. The computer reads the binary values of your file and instructs the printer to produce an image following the plan. Different printers construct images in different ways. Dye sublimation printers heat the paper to produce colour values. Inkjet printers spray coloured inks onto the page. Each printed version is a brand new production. Just as each time you ask the computer to load the file, it's a brand new, on-screen digital production. None of these productions is the original, and they're not inherently unique. Multiple brand new productions can be made, all indistinguishable from each other. One example, multiple printouts, is often referred to as copies, but unlike photocopies, these are not copies, but all identical original productions. The original production of an image on screen, following the binary code from the file, can be very different depending on your device. A new production of an image on my TV looks different to an image produced from the same source code on my phone. This variation in the production comes not from the source code itself, but from the capabilities, limits and settings of the particular screen that it's been constructed for. I can then manually change the settings on my screen and physically change the image, changing the contrast, for example. At this point, I want to make something clear about semantics. There's a difference between a unique work and an original work. Something original need not be unique. Something unique need not be original. For example, if I paint my own version of the Mona Lisa, it will be unique, but clearly the idea behind the work is not original. Originality is highly valued by most art critics, but most artwork is not truly original. Who was the first person to have the idea? Uniqueness is also valued by art critics, but it's far easier to achieve. Every painting is inherently unique by virtue of human inconsistency. I feel it's also a good time to point out that whilst many consider the file to be the original in terms of digital art, there are inherent problems with this idea. You can copy a file multiple times on the computer. You can email files and upload them to the internet. Multiple, seemingly identical files can be created and they're indistinguishable from each other at first glance. However, each will be stored in a different physical location. In the case of a file sent via email, the file will now exist as an original on your hard drive, but also as a copy on the hard drive of the web server. If you have multiple identical files on your desktop, the computer may be giving you a representation of multiple files as icons, but truly only keep one original file on the hard drive and simply be creating new, multiple portals leading to the same root file. A file is an abstract concept. It doesn't really exist. It's the language the computer uses to translate binary values into virtual objects that we can understand. When creating these original productions from the file, these forms of digital art production, on screen or printed, are not the original. The original is burned onto a computer drive. However, all of these productions are brand new original productions made from the original instruction. Much like a mould and a bronze, the file is the mould and the screen creates the bronze. However, on our screen, the bronze is only a temporary creation. It's made up of pixels, all set to a certain colour by the computer that follows the instructions we left for it. Turn off the computer and the screen goes blank. The image is gone. The pixels are blank. The bronze is now non-existent. It's been totally destroyed. Next time you want to view the image, you ask the computer to create another new production, and a new bronze is created for you to view. In contrast, a printout is a tangible, physical, and long-lasting object. So the discussion about displaying the original work in the exhibition is a difficult one. This is not just the case when it comes to digital art, but also other forms of art. Performance art, conceptual art, film, and music all have the same issue. It's not something that all these worlds struggle with though. It's often something people find adds a value and quality to the work that cannot be quantified into a product or an object. This non-object art is often called conceptual art for the sake of general understanding and consumption. I want to reference a piece of my own artwork here. I created a video for YouTube entitled 500 Views. Once the video had been viewed 500 times, I removed and deleted it. Thus, I created a piece of art. The work was a response to YouTube culture, where more views equates to popularity and is seen as a form of success. I wanted to go against this ethic and to show that I could create success by specifically limiting the number of views and redefining my values. I wanted to draw upon the ideas presented by performance art, specifically the value of something ephemeral and non-object. When you watch a ballet performance, a play, hear an opera performed, a piece of music played, or a live song sung, you're left in no doubt that what you've just witnessed is art. It may have been repeatedly rehearsed and repeatedly performed, but each performance is unique. No performance is truly original, yet no two performances are truly identical. In my work, 500 Views, the original video file was not the artwork. The experience of viewing the video, an experience enjoyed by 500 people across the world on various devices, was not the artwork. Those things were the process. The medium for the work was not video. It was ideas. It was concepts. This is the true nature of conceptual art, where the aesthetic is not as important as the idea. There's no original object to keep and hold. There's only my recorded evidence of the process, and the testimony of the 500, to prove the existence of the work. What is art? Is it the skill of the craftsman? Is it in the brushes? Is it the ability to draw a perfect circle? Is it the emotions that drive and inspire an artist? Is it something in the soul? To many people, the emotional response and non-physical qualities are not easy to define or capture, but they seem to be key to defining something as art. When performing a play, the actors and the audience are aware that the performance is not the first. It's not an original, but it can still be unique. The experience is what most matters to the audience, not the process or the replicability. The problem of creating an original rather than a replica and it being unique are only problems if you require art to fulfill a certain function. That's the function of an object. This idea, objectification, is not required for art to be truly successful. Objectification is a criterion specific to a capitalist consumer system of personal ownership. The values of objectification are only required when the capitalist private ownership system needs to control art in order to create a value that fits the system so it can be understood. This means that we need to make objects to sell them, to ascribe this financial value to them, to have them accepted by the social structure as art. In truth, the value of any object is entirely subjective, relative and transient. There's also another truth, that this system of personal, private ownership, consumer-led capitalism finds difficult to quantify. That is, experiences can be valuable. Non-objects, things that do not exist, feelings, memories, thoughts, ideas can all be valuable. Again, value is transient, subjective and relative. We cannot put a true monetary value on experiences or on our memories. Often things are described as priceless. A very distasteful advertising campaign for a credit card company utilised this idea to attempt to sell you the idea that sentimental, priceless experiences can and should be bought. They cannot. I'm going to take another small diversion. This whole thing sounds like a bit of a diversion, doesn't it? When's he going to talk about digital art? I want to take a small diversion to explain another important meta-concept. After the Second World War, our consumer society took shape based predominantly on the work of one economist, John Maynard Keynes. It's not an exaggeration to say that his ideas dramatically inform not only our physical world, but also the mindset and the ideology of those who are educated by and reside in the society. The fundamental principles of Keynes's work are based on free market economics and monetary policy. Basically, the market should decide on price through the dynamics of supply and demand. The government can affect supply and demand through control over the money supply. Decrease interest rates and it becomes less sensible to save your money in a bank account at low yield. It becomes more sensible to borrow money at the low rate, and thus demand is increased across the economy as more disposable income is accessible to the people. The reverse is also true. Increase interest rates and you lower aggregate demand. However, there are some major failings in this system. There's no provision for social care, for example, no provision for defence. To explain this in as simple terms as possible, in a free market, who should pay for the street lighting? Would one individual choose to pay for the street lighting for the whole street? Should the street club together and provide their own street lights? What happens if a stranger walks on the street? Should we turn off the street lights because they've not paid for them? What happens if a resident can't afford to pay for the lights? In a free market, they should not get lights if they can't pay. Supply and demand. But you can't prevent people from benefiting from light if you provide it. So we can see there are failings in the model. Thus, the true Keynesian principles of free market economics are compromised through the workings of a government. In true free market economics, the government should not exist as the market would not be regulated but left to find its own equilibriums. Another great failing of free market economics is that whilst on paper, manipulating money supply and interest rates give measurable and dependable results, in practice they do not. The true social system is far more complex and human behaviour follows psychological and social patterns, not economic or mathematical ones. Thus, the free market system is corrupted and bastardized, distorted and exploited. It's not fair. It's not intended to be fair. This is not just the world we live in, it's the culture we Westerners have constructed for ourselves and neglect to change. In response to this, other forms of more ethical and fair social organisation have been proposed. In the post-war world, between 1947 and 1991, the most obvious and contrasting system was communism. Now, I'm aware communism has also failed to deliver equality and ethical sustainability in practice. Anyway, during this, the Cold War, the ideas and concepts that directly oppose the values of Keynesian Western consumer-led capitalism became dangerous, subversive concepts to Western governments. They were regarded with fear and confusion by the society at large. Efforts to further indoctrinate the population to adhere to and internalise Western capitalist values were made through propaganda and advertising, through education and entertainment. It worked. It works best for those in positions of power or privilege, and they're reticent to instigate justice in favour of retaining their profits and perceived security. It's hard to see the objective truth if you've been educated and indoctrinated with a belief system from birth, a belief system that's not only upheld by your peers but praised and lauded. In contrast, those exhibiting conflicting beliefs and ideas are generally deplored and admonished. This is clearly because alternative ideas are perceived as a threat. Many members of society are confused and defensive. They have to struggle with their peers for social dominance and personal gain on a daily basis. The educated few, as education costs money and to become educated you require a stable social environment only available to the financially secure in our system. Sadly, they're not as ethical as they are educated, and most of their education is infected by indoctrination. Some do not see the light, some do see the light, but then most grab the torch for themselves and use their privilege for personal gain rather than to spread social justice. Our local MP is a good example of this. He's seen in a positive sense by the consumer capitalists. To say a good businessman may be an oxymoron, but he's regarded as ethically bankrupt and disgusting by the moral and caring few who really understand the bigger picture. This is true of many Western leaders and successful people. It's led to Donald Trump becoming president. Anyway, I digress. The main point I want to make here is that objectification is an inherent value of consumer-based capitalism, and thus our ideas about the object and art are infected by this ideology, because we are all relatively bourgeois and we live in this society. It's like using dirty water to wash our thought brushes. It's hard to escape the taint. So our society, and I'm talking about, Great Britain, not the art society here. So our society, in general, upholds bad ideas about objectification and has little time or room even attacking the alternative. Sadly, this economic ideology infects the world of art. Art can and does exist independently of economics. Clearly, some art is designed to sell, because some artists these days produce art interwoven with economic ideas. This is because these are ideas that they've internalised. They are, put simply, normal people in our society. Still, in the art world, those with different and alternative ideas and values are often held in high regard. In art, to be seen as an independent thinker who challenges the social norms and values is often a quality rather than a curse. The opposite is also true. In the world of music, selling out is seen in a very negative sense by some. Most think of pop songs as low culture, not because they're popular amongst the proletariat, but because they're actually artistically base or facile. Cliché and homogenization rule, but they're not cool. The unique and individual is actively sought out. Sadly, the unique is often repackaged by the corporate, reproduced and rehashed. This is referred to as fashion, where demand for products can be created by tricking consumers into believing they're making choices based on artistic or cultural merit. Artistic ideas are progressively repurposed, adopted by the mainstream, before being sold out entirely until all original value has been wrung from the concepts. This then moves from mainstream to become unfashionable and is replaced by the next subculture to be hijacked into the mainstream. This process ends up recycling its own dated ideas to a new market as new generations buy into the retro. Fashion is driven by money and the need for capitalist society to consume and discard goods indefinitely. The artistic elements are channeled into non-artistic pursuits. Fashion needs art for ideas, but art does not need fashion or trends. Fashion is all about selling out. Selling out is viewed with suspicion by artists, with good reason. I remember one of our demonstrators, a great guy, telling us that he painted a lot of images of birds because they sold well. Marketing, economic principles of supply and demand seem to be of little value to me when I approach the production of art. I want to make good art with interesting ideas, art that can move people. I also produce art as a form of personal catharsis, to express emotions that I can't easily voice, often as a pressure release valve. Sometimes I'm surprised by what comes out. Often, in the production or performance of the songs I write, for example, I can be moved to tears, as emotions I've not fully understood or processed come to the fore. This is why I write songs. They're inside me and I need to let them out. The process is not academic, it's intuitive. I don't sit and plan out anything. I just play the instruments to express the way I feel, and the words tumble out as I play. Then I make a note of the key chord progressions and lyrics and reiterate until I have a more recognisable verse-chorus-verse format. It takes a couple of hours from start to finish to write a song. I'm not beholden to shareholders or the market. I'm not making art to sell, but to make art. Of course, I'm not a commercially viable musician. I find it as difficult to perform my work as I would to read my diary aloud in a pub full of strangers. I'm still happier in my work than I would be singing covers of cliché-riddled pop ballads on the X Factor final. To each their own. The idea of making art for the market ends up homogenising the artwork, and ironically, the true originals end up standing out and are considered more valuable, and are then copied. Stay with me, because this is all leading back to our digital art problem. I know we're going off on one, but stay with me. There's a strange concept in Keynesian economics, the Veblen good. This describes goods or objects that are not beholden to the natural laws of supply and demand. Conversely, the higher the price, the higher the demand to an extent. Examples of this would be caviar, designer jewellery, haircuts or cars. It's a strange concept to economists as it breaks their ascribed rules. It's a strange concept to the sensible because it describes the act of spending more money on something than it's truly worth. Some people say, people have more money than sense when they pursue Veblen goods. Others, indoctrinated and holding capitalist values to heart, take the opposite stance and laud their overpriced purchases as trophies. They feel good even when they kind of got conned. Exclusivity and elitism is often confused with quality. To accommodate art in economic terms, it's termed a Veblen good. The higher the price, the higher the perceived value. In most Western cultures, art is procured by three kinds of buyer: the personal owner, the museum, and the investor. The world of art as an investment takes artworks of all forms and totally recontextualizes them, removing most of what makes them good works. Investment sees art as an object of monetary value. Indeed, the majority of art investment portfolios work in a very similar way. For example, each year university graduates of the prestigious Goldsmiths of London produce a series of works. These works and collections are almost entirely bought at auction, mainly by investment banks. The works get packed into shipping containers and flown out to an airport storage facility to avoid tax, where they're left in darkness for some years. As time passes, some of these works actually decline in financial value. Some increase in financial value. The fact that this university is so prestigious almost guarantees that at least one of the annual crop of artists will become the next big thing, for various reasons. The art is procured as an investment, and the shrewd investor, by buying a bit of everything, has hedged their bets. This creates high demand for these works, and the market is forced to assume they're of high quality as they're going for high prices. This helps the market to self-perpetuate. Markets like this are often known as bubbles because they're self-serving and they can implode. However, as long as people are willing to continue putting in money, the market continues to sustain. In subsequent years, the financially valuable art is sold off at auction for a second time, and a large profit can be made from the few works that have dramatically increased in financial value. If you bought an early Hearst, it would be worth a lot more today than the initial sale price, and far more after his death. The rest of the works, by artists who for whatever reason have not become as valued, are then discarded, literally thrown away, as they're not perceived as valuable in a financial context. This is the sad reality of the investment trade in art that fuels the high valuations, exclusivity, and apparent value of some works. The huge figures spent on artworks at auction do not reflect the quality or true value of the work, but more accurately reflect the financial value ascribed by a market of confused consumers and cynical investors, restricting the supply of the product and creating bubbles that they can feed and profit from. Further confusion arises when regarding art as a consumable good, as we must in the Keynesian model. As object art is most often considered a Veblen good, the entire concept has been played with by modern conceptual artists. Damien Hirst, it is my belief, is poking fun or taking the piss out of anyone foolish, selfish and arrogant enough to buy his work and take pride in the ownership of the object simply based on the myth. He does so by producing works of little intrinsic or apparent artistic value, refusing to explain the ideas behind the objects, and wins or succeeds in his con trick if the works are sold. The irony is that this process does create a very important artistic value to his work, specifically the concepts that surround it, as well as creating a high financial value. He can get away with it because he has an art degree from a very specific, prestigious university. Another fantastic and earlier example of this principle is Artist's Shit, produced and canned by Piero Manzoni in 1961, now owned by the Tate, and undoubtedly introduced to Hirst and his peers through their university course. Little link there, www.tate.org/Manzoni-artists-shit. So, while the ideas and indoctrination of the values of consumer capitalist post-war society to the people within the society are hard to extricate oneself from, some artists believe they must do so in order to be able to be true artists. In fact, Theodor Adorno of the Frankfurt School of Philosophy believed that in the face of a deplorable social structure, the only path available to the truly astute and sentient is to become an artist, or presumably a philosopher. https:/plato.stanford.edu/entries/Adorno. Otherwise, we might be in danger of being commercial entities, producing works that may be well crafted and beautiful, but ultimately are produced for the market and not for the true value of the art. The dynamics that shape our work would be economic and not artistic. So, that was a little diversion into economics and history and how these factors and dynamics inform our opinions regarding what art is, what is valuable, and what is unique, and what is original. Let's get back to the concepts of digital art, objects versus non-object art, and tracing the root of the original or the unique with regard to digital art. While most would understand an image created with a software tool is a digital artwork, it must also be understood and accepted that there are other forms of digital artwork. Virtual reality experiences are digital artwork, but virtually all of modern photography is digital artwork. Modern music is digital artwork. Modern film is digital artwork. Any form of creative art that utilizes any form of computer in the production process is generally now considered digital. Is cooking a digital process if we use a digital scale to weigh the ingredients? There's clearly some confusion as to what is a digital artwork and what is simply an artwork that utilizes some digital tools. When we discuss mixed media, we tend to refer to physical mediums. Conception art is almost always mixed media in physical manifestation, but has no physical medium per se, and utilizes a palette of thoughts and ideas, concepts, to create and inform the work. I suggest that the idea that any artwork created by a human being, regardless of digital tools used, begins life as an idea and goes through a phase of production. As humans, all of our interactions with the means of production require some level of analog process. We physically move the mouse, we physically press the buttons, even if it's an analog interaction with a digital device. Not all ideas are original. They're hardly ever original. Some components are almost never original. For example, the Mona Lisa is not an original idea. This was not the first work to use paint to create an image of a person. It was not the first portrait. It was not the first painting in a style. It was probably not even the first painting of the subject. It's categorically not original. It may well be highly valued and totally unique, but not original. It may, in future, not even be unique, as our ability to reproduce items and objects increases in sophistication. One day, in the not too distant future, we'll be able to scan the physical object and faithfully reproduce it with machines. Will this new object be of the same value as the original? Will it affect the value of the original? I suppose it all depends on where you believe the value to exist. Will it still be art? What if we mixed up the two identical works? Now you can't determine which is the original Mona Lisa and which is the copy. Will it matter? What properties of the original make it more important than the identical copy? What matters? It would seem it's not all about the position of the paint on the canvas. Maybe it's the fact the artist produced the original by hand. So what if a superbly skilled person created an identical copy? We sometimes call this reproduction, but also fraud, depending on the context the work is presented to us in. So it probably matters that it was the original artist making the marks, and not just the marks themselves. By thinking about this issue of perfect replica, it's clear more importance is ascribed to the truth of the concepts we attach to an object than the actual truth of the object itself. So back to our concern. What's digital art? I don't think we can ever put a border and a definition around any form of art. When does a sketch with some watercolour added become a watercolour and stop being a sketch? This is a rhetorical question that I don't even believe requires an answer. It's not very important. The ability to give a logical definition is not as important as the ideas, the heart, and the emotive qualities of art, in my opinion. This is why people often cannot say why they like a piece, only they feel a certain way about it. Often work that involves or invokes an emotional response is seen as good art. I propose that artwork can never be fully defined by the tools or even the process. Whilst you may decide some work is watercolour art, it may be easier for us all just to say art without the need for qualifying criteria. There's certainly no set of hard and fast rules. Artists routinely blend mediums and techniques. Maybe it's not important to be able to define what is and is not art. Maybe it's more important to be able to make a clear case for what's good or valuable art. Of course, I'm not referring to the monetary values ascribed to certain works because of our current social structure and market economics, but I allude to something greater. Why is art important to society? What is it about the human condition that causes us to create and consume art? The expression, the ideas, and the emotional content. Big picture, something agreed on by the art world in general, is that art is not craft. Art is not design. Art is not engineering. All these practices can be artistic, but art is not limited by these factors, nor is an artist limited by their proficiency in these disciplines. Here comes a quote. Every work of art at some point is conceptualized and/or created. Artists, philosophers, critics and curators have explored different ideas about the creative process and the actions of artists in creating artworks. This has led some artists to focus more on the activity of creating art rather than on a resulting finished object. For them, making art can be a process, performance or action that blurs the boundaries between visual art, dance, media art and theatre. This is sometimes referred to as performance art or process art. The artists may not know in advance the exact outcomes of their activity, and chance occurrences or unpredictable events become an important part of their work. That's from Is Art an Object or Is It a Process? At www.schools.walkerart.org, blah, blah, blah. Art is not objectification, fetishization, or materialism. The trend to blur the two worlds, art and consumerism, requires there to be an object or a product. Consumer society needs to be able to point to the object and say, that's the original, unique piece of art, because it needs to sell the object. And more importantly, because this object can sit comfortably within the structure of the economic and ideological system. Other forms of art that transgress these borders of objectification actually threaten the system. The early work of Banksy was obviously transgressive in the content and politically motivated, but it's also important that the medium, graffiti, was one of inherent social transgression. The problem of how to own and exhibit these early works was immediately solved by the artist. You can't own them, you can only share them. Side note, people did end up illegally removing sections of walls, but this is beside the point and comedically subverting or reverting the subversion. Banksy prints were produced and sold, and his iconic images were procured and rehashed by corporations, selling to the confused masses who mistakenly thought they were buying original cool. Only the residents of Bristol in the 90s were really consumers of the true works of Banksy. All the rest were buying into copies and adaptations of an idea, and the alternative ideals are replaced, repackaged and diluted into mainstream products. Artworks that transgress ideals of individual property ownership signal fallacies in the concept of objectification and personal ownership. These fallacies are very real and vulnerable. The most obvious being that you do not ever truly own anything. You simply share in the use of the atoms. When you die, you take nothing with you. You can't own the sunlight, the soil, or the water, despite our social attempts to regulate and charge for these things. You simply share them for a time. So, objectification and object art leads to a lucrative market, but can also lead to an emperor's new clothes scenario, where the market defines what's valid and valuable. We then depend on the intelligence and sophistication of individuals who make up the market to define what is and is not art. They cannot, not without education and experience, determine if the emperor is truly naked. Indeed, often their education and experience leads them to believe in a falsehood. Maybe the naivety of children can help us to find some common truth. We all had our paintings on the fridge at some stage. We all hold the pictures painted by our relatives and loved ones in special high regard. Interestingly, these are often regarded as priceless works due to their sentimental value. In truth, there are some artworks that children could not have the ability to truly value. This is because some of the works are valuable based on their context and their position in the evolving historical story of art and culture, their ability to question, inspire, and influence. This context can only be fully appreciated with a deep understanding that's accessed through education and the ability to think critically. As an artist who finds value in the heart and soul of the work as much as the context, expression, or message, objectification or aesthetic beauty is not always high on the list of values displayed by the art that I love. 100 years ago, Fountain by Duchamp in 1917 directly dismantled the belief that the value is in the object. There's no need for an object to even exist, as Vito Acconci proved in Following Piece, 1969. Whilst in this case the medium is listed as gelatin silver prints, felt tip pen and map on board, these objects are actually the evidence and not the medium. As the artist followed strangers around the city, the medium was a concept. You can find that at www.moma.org/collection/works/blah blah blah. Art without ideas is just decoration. A quote much repeated. I don't know who originally said it. At first, this looks like a scathing attack on the decorative and to some extent the fine arts. However, it could be read in the opposite way. Here comes a quote. To say that art without meaning is decoration implies that all art must have meaning. In some ways, this is true. Even the most seemingly innocuous image may still hold meaning to the person who created it. Not all artwork needs to have a deep or conceptual backstory. Still, asking our students to think about the reasons why they create may help them design richer works of art. That was Ian Sands from The Art of Education. Is art without meaning decoration? On the old internet there. Sticking things on at random and then letting art happen by accident, a trial and error approach, is not the same as having an idea and using a medium to express it, nor is this true process art. Following a rigid set of rules and becoming a skilled draftsman capable of faithfully and accurately reproducing images in charcoal is not the same as having a deep feeling and using a medium to express it. Now, I am being cheeky here, referencing some of the styles and practices of artists who have demonstrated for us at the Methodist Hall. Sometimes I wonder if the only difference between our demonstrators and our society members is that the demonstrators have found a way to regularly sell their works. If it sells, it's art. They are indeed skilled artists. Are they producing the unique? Are they producing the original? Does it matter if they're not concerned with the emotional or the conceptual? What is an art? What is a craft? And what is a skill? Again, I'm not going to attempt to answer these questions, and I also want to make it clear this is not an attack on the Art Society, but an attempt to question the values so we can get the most out of the experience. I'm using the demonstrators as examples and being overly harsh in truth. I do believe most have a capability for deeper emotional expression through art. I'm generally very impressed. So, to get back to our problem of how to deal with digital art by taking another digressive path. Consider sculpture and the casting of bronzes. There was a huge problem in the market for these works. Is the bronze the original or a casting of an original? The original was traditionally carved from sandstone and then used to create a mould. Artists began the practice of producing limited, signed numbers of casts and then breaking the mould, hence the expression regarding originality. Even this could not stop reproduction, as the bronzes can be used to create new moulds. Here comes a quote, and it's a long one. A reading of sculpture exhibition and auction catalogues often leaves us perplexed as to whether the work in bronze, plaster or terracotta is unique, original, an original edition, a limited or unlimited edition, or a copy. The notion of originality is clearly easier to understand when dealing with a painting, which is inherently unique. A workshop copy or copy produced by another artist in some other era is considered to be a reproduction. Only the painting produced by the master painter can be the original. Workshop reproductions then raise the issue of attribution. Which student did the work and what part of the work was done by the master, who sometimes even signs. A painting, even though unique, may not be original. This means, obviously, that the work lacks original creativity and that its author stayed within a well-established style. In traditional art, it's very easy for the creative process and its emotional expression to get usurped by the product, such as a one-of-a-kind masterpiece sold in an elitist gallery, previewed in creative journals using language as hard to understand as a legal document and sold to a wealthy patron to use as a status symbol. Digital art offers endless creative possibilities with no limits in duplication. This emphasises the creative process and the idea and de-emphasises the preciousness of the original physical product. That quote's from a book called Digital Art Revolution by Scott Ligon. Film is another interesting medium that has some parallels with our conundrum. Artists make films. Film is a medium. Films are artworks. This is not up for debate. There are clearly many different kinds of film though. Some are more arty and others less so. The problem here is pop culture. Andy Warhol pointed out the time lag between popular culture and the art world 50 years ago in the 1960s. He highlighted the factors that made artworks of popular culture difficult to digest for traditional thinkers. Here's another quote. During the decades following World War II, the United States and a number of European countries experienced tremendous growth in consumerism. For some artists, the overwhelming presence of consumer products and popular culture led them to question the lack of connection between art and real life. The term high art was used to refer to painting, sculpture and other works that followed the accepted theories of art at the time, and that we would expect to see exhibited in galleries and museums. Low art, or popular culture, referred to imagery made for the general public, such as that found in comic books, industrial design, movies, television and advertising. Traditionally, the art world did not consider popular culture as a worthy source of art. Some artists rebelled against these established traditions by taking images or objects from popular culture, low art, and displaying them in art institutions. Their goal was to break down the barriers between high art and the objects we live with, and to make people think about the values of the culture around them. That quote was from What's the Difference Between Art and Popular Culture from http:/schools.walkerart.org. So, we can have Batman movies created and many would not consider them works of art because they're not good works of art. That is to say, a child's drawing of a house in crayon is still art. It's just not very valuable to the commercial market, although perhaps priceless to a parent. The reason Batman movies are not very good art is they lack originality. The ideas and concepts have been overused and seen before. They're full of cliché. Originality and uniqueness are two different things. It's possible for art to be unique, but totally unoriginal. I'll pose another question. What's more valuable? A unique piece or an original one? In reality, virtually everything is unique, and even perfect reproductions can be made unique with the simplest of touches. Again, I'll reference Fountain, where the R-MUT signature, physical alteration, and the placing of the object in a gallery setting, recontextualization, non-physical alteration, transforms the 1 of a million toilet bowl into a 1 in a million unique artwork. This work was important because it heralded the use of ready-mades. These objects were by definition not unique artworks, but rather items found in the environment and repurposed with little or no physical alteration by the artist. There are a huge number of artworks in this genre, and artists even blur the lines further by incorporating ready-made items into their works as a medium. What's the difference in arranging liquids of varying colours on a canvas to arranging oversized silver objects in a room? The skill, the intent, the overall aesthetic. Indeed, the artwork of the conceptual artist is anti-aesthetic. More accurately, the aesthetic is not the most important part of the work. It can even be removed. And here's a link, because I was talking about those giant pieces of silver. Here's a piece called 30 Pieces of Silver at the Tate, and the link is in the description. Getting back to our art society, the reason digital art is being discussed and the friction. We have an exhibition and there are two key difficulties. The primary issue is how to display the digital art. The concept of the unique, the original, the production and the copies only becomes an issue when we're required to turn a piece of non-object art into an object. I suggest that if we do not attempt to create a box for digital art, we won't have trouble fitting works into the parameters of our box. To speak in plain English, it doesn't matter if it's an original or a copy. We should relax and just accept works as art and be able to include them in the exhibition as printed forms alongside and adhering to the same physical restrictions like size and shape as all the other works of art. We're kind of creating a problem for ourselves where no problem truly exists. Our rules and parameters are not consistent with the true nature of digital artwork. Hence, digital artwork does not fit our parameters. Our parameters must be discarded if they're of no use. Digital art, or art, will not change to fit our parameters. Our parameters must change to accommodate the art. I reiterate the point. What is the original piece of digital art? It's not a computer file which is an abstract, non-object concept. It does exist. It's a series of values, binary true-false, recorded to a hard disk. Thankfully for us, this issue has been tackled by the wider art world. We should look to organisations such as the Tate to guide our exhibition as they've encountered and logistically solved the problem of how to display digital art. When a gallery or museum procures a piece of art, they most often buy object art. They then choose how to display this object. The museum or exhibition space decides how to display the object. If an artist is concerned with the way their object is being displayed, they often leave instructions, hanging instructions, or physically arrange the object themselves. Some artists are not concerned with the decisions made in the display of their work. Some are dead, and we can't ask them for their opinions. If an artist is concerned with the way their work will be displayed and consumed, if they're interested in the experience, they can take the next logical step and make these decisions as part of the work. This kind of work is called installation. When an artist creates an installation, they set all the variables and the exhibition simply provides the space. Often, the limiting factor of space is known to the artist and they plan their work accordingly. Often installations vary depending on the space they inhabit. Equally, larger spaces are physically divided by the artist as part of the installation process if necessary. Little Deaths by Bill Viola in 1993, a darkened room and several projectors. These projectors play short bursts of film and figures appear and vanish in sequence in the darkness. There's also sound tracking. This is a digital work in the main creation process, film media. The projection is an analog technique replicated in digital format. Still, the piece is a whole when considered as an installation. The art is not just the aesthetic. How the room makes you feel is important. The darkness is part of the experience. There's more at work than the visual aspect to this installation. And that's at the Tate. And you can find that on their website, tate.org/video/Tate Shots Bill Viola. Across the river from the Tate, in St. Paul's Cathedral, is a large screen displaying a looped video of a person being drenched with an apparently infinite flow of water. 3 more figures are suffering elemental tortures. This work was also created by Bill Viola. Again, this is an installation. As the work was commissioned by St. Paul's, we have to assume they had some direction and input, but they did not commission a digital work and then put it on a screen of their choice. The screen came as part of the work. It's a medium. The work is the whole piece. Performances recorded, edited, digital images on a screen, an installation. And you'll find that at www.stpauls.co.uk/history-collection/the collection/arts program/Bill Viola. So we can see that when creating art with or without a digital component to the process, the artist can choose how to display their final original piece if they believe the work requires it. Thus, digital art has found its place. It's not the final result. It's not the object. It's part of a process, a medium. If we want to exhibit digital work in a physical form, the artist is required to follow the process to a conclusion and to create the final work, to install a physical manifestation of the work. Of course, in the most easily recognisable form of digital art, a screen is often employed. This screen is not a way of displaying an original, unique artwork. It's a component of a unique, original artwork. It could be that a digital artist prefers to present their work, created with a digital process, in a format more easily recognisable to the gallery visitor. They may choose to make their final piece on a printed paper version. It could be printed on canvas for that matter. Again, this would all depend on the artist following their work to a conclusion in their own style. Digital artists do not always want to, or believe they need to, provide this unique object physical manifestation of their work. Pieces of non-object art are created specifically with the understanding that the consumer will be choosing the context and the frame. They're designed with this in mind. This encapsulates the more universally known forms of digital non-object art, like images and photographs shared online, or films. This would also include modern songs and music. We all understand that we'll be consuming the artwork through our own devices. We all understand this denatures the artwork in certain ways. Some strive for the same production as the original vision of the artist, with large cinematic home entertainment systems instead of small television sets. Some care to hear music produced to the vision of the composer by using sophisticated speaker systems. Some prefer to witness the live performance. It's a choice of the consumer. The artists often understand this multi-format consumption and create works that will look and sound good through a variety of production systems. Others even leave instructions for the consumer. Kurt Cobain would give bass and treble settings in his album sleeve notes. When considering artworks produced for our exhibition, the artist is fully aware of the context and physical environment their work will inhabit. This even informs their choice of subject and medium. I remember talking to artists who decided to paint something that would stand out, for example. Our exhibition has set a precedent when it comes to the inclusion of submissions. We already impose a set of criteria on standard object art. That is to say, paintings must not exceed certain dimensions. We also have set precedents when it comes to the display of the works. The works are submitted as objects, and the committee decides not only which objects will be included in the exhibition, but also how and where to hang and display the works. The artist is not party to this process and does not have final say. Thus, I understand the process of submitting and displaying a digitally produced image, a non-object created with digital means, is subject to the same process. Submission, acceptance and finally display, all at the discretion of the committee and the exhibition rather than the desire of the artist. Thus, it does not have to matter to the committee whether the presentation of digital art falls within the true philosophical nature of the art itself. It does not have to be their main criteria for making decisions. I believe the ideas about the true nature of non-object art should heavily inform the decisions of the committee. For me, personally, being faithful to the art is the most important factor when making decisions about art. I have already described my desire to create art for the sake of the content, for the concepts and the ideas that the artwork is informed by, is made up of, expresses and evokes. For others, the ideas surrounding the commercial sale of objects may be more important. I do understand logistics and bureaucracy have a role to play in the planning of an exhibition. I must make an impassioned plea that the workings of our art society be culturally and ethically dedicated to the truth of art and not overbalanced or overshadowed by the technicalities and logistics of running an organisation. We should ascribe a higher value to the pursuit of the truth of art than to the dedication to the management of a committee. Art is about passion, emotion and creativity. It's an expression of the soul, of something indescribable and indefinable that makes us human. I think we should take a more relaxed approach to what is or is not acceptable for display in our exhibition. Creating strict definitions and rules may create a filter that obstructs very valid and potentially very good works from being submitted or exhibited. That is to say, that we might end up with a lot of very similar objects, but be holding back the full-blooded, hard to capture and explain, but potentially very valuable works of art. Ultimately, the decisions fall to the committee, and their choices are informed by many contrasting factors. I again make a plea to create a culture of acceptance for all forms of artwork. The alternative is to be a society that excludes some forms of art. This is quite acceptable for some societies. We could be a sculpture society. We could be a fine art society. This is the choice of the society en masse, I suppose. But until we add this qualifying parameter to our title, I'm happy to assume that we're an inclusive art society, and as such we open our arms and minds to all forms of art with excitement and enthusiasm. I assume we enjoy art of all forms and find it interesting and enjoyable to explore all forms of art. I certainly do. With my tongue firmly in my cheek, I say, if people get cross about a 100-year-old modern art form like installation or conceptual art, maybe they'd be happier in a painting club than at an art society. I'm being cheeky. So, to boil this down to a direct and actionable proposal for the displaying of digital art at our exhibition, here come my proposals, finally. I think we should utilise the means available to us, in this case our audiovisual kit or the audiovisual equipment in the hall that we exhibit at, to allow us to display works of digital art on a screen. I do not think this should be a limiting idea though. I think screens would allow us to display a huge range of works, paintings, sculptures, conceptual works, videos about works, etc., etc., that have not been able to be physically presented elsewhere in the exhibition. We should harness the technology to provide as much for the consumer or visitor and the members of the society as possible. All works that do not get selected for physical hanging could be shown on the screen in a slideshow. This would dramatically increase the amount of work we can include in the exhibition whilst not requiring infinite physical space. Members would benefit as all submitted works could be included. If the committee feels we should invest in a larger screen than our existing audiovisual monitor or a projector, so be it. I'm all for furthering our display capabilities. Indeed, I propose these capabilities could be further exploited by using the kit to show videos produced by and for the Society, an idea I've drafted in a separate proposal, my spring audiovisual report. We should also consider the frequency of use for said screens and investigate if hiring them might be a logistical sensibility. More than this, we should continue to open the door to non-traditional artworks by creating spaces and filling them through a process of submission and selection in much the same way as we already do. Our spaces for these artworks may be bigger for each individual work than the spaces allocated to paintings, but this is the nature of installation art. It's not unfair, as anyone can submit a proposal for an installation. I think members of the Society should be excited to join the rest of the art world in presenting installation work and mixed media. We should be allocating space to works of various formats. We already do. It's already proved successful with the sculpture space. There's no need to restrict digital art to one screen. This would be unfair. Other works hang in their allocated space. If all the digital art is presented on one screen, we'll have to cycle through the works. This would mean the physical paintings are privileged. Physical works have to jostle for wall space, but are always observable. The digital works would have to vie for airtime, and you cannot choose how long you spend looking at a piece of work. This would be unfair. It would be far more egalitarian to allow digitally produced work to be submitted in physical form, as with photography. Maybe a digital exhibition online would be a way to present our digital works in a different context and eradicate the difficulty in physically representing them at the exhibition. However, this would be an imperfect solution, as it would not cover other forms of conceptual work and seem to close the door to a more diverse, open-minded approach to future physical exhibition standards. Still, this might be an idea that we can instigate and return to. I do appreciate this is kind of happening with our works in our monthly painting competition online. I hope we can expand or refine this aspect of our online presence, maybe by launching time-finite, seasonal online exhibitions. As I've discussed, the problem of the original and copies is not really solved by the restriction that digitally produced work must not be submitted in physical format and will subsequently be displayed by the committee in their choice of physical medium. This does not address the concerns about originality or uniqueness. It simply limits the ability of the Society to exhibit a variety of works in their best quality or suggested format. It should fall upon the individual artist to burden the cost of any installation, be it a screen, a statue, or a painting. It should fall upon the discretion of the artist to ascribe a price to the work entire. All works could be given the same restrictions, size or wall space, but I feel this approach is already in tatters as there's a sculpture space. Clearly the Society wants to allow other forms of art, other mediums, the respect and room to coexist with the paintings. Clearly all forms of art do not fit into the same physical spaces, and to be fair to the art requires an inequality when sharing out space. Certainly, some non-object art is hard to sell or own. This should not be a criteria that precludes it from being exhibited. This would be like shooting ourselves in the foot. Many exhibitions and museums with commercial gains at heart utilise works that are not for sale. This is to draw in the customers and drive sales. More people coming in through the doors is for the better, and often displaying something controversial or interesting can achieve this, even if you cannot directly purchase the work. It leads to further purchases and higher ticket receipts. People still visit art exhibitions that include works that they are not attracted to. Variety is not seen to put people off. Often, people want to be able to view art and decide for themselves, even if they decide the work is rubbish, regardless of the validity of their opinion. Ultimately, the quality and artistic value of the work should determine its place in the exhibition, not the retail potential of a particular piece. It should fall upon the discretion of the consumer whether to buy a piece and how to ascertain its uniqueness or originality. Price and true value of work do not have to be in balance. This would be entirely subjective anyway. Our ability to display a variety of works on a screen is not a creation of installation art. I believe it would be disrespectful to the digital works to assume you can bundle them all onto one screen and to not offer them an equal hanging space alongside the paintings. It would be fantastic to use screens to display all manner of works in photographic and video format. Here I mean photographs of all paintings and works submitted displayed on the screen as a slideshow, videos about work, etc., as previously described. But this is not the same as viewing the original or unique piece. Whilst I appreciate the idea of introducing a screen for digital works is a move towards acceptance of digital works, the logic of displaying all digital works on the same screen falls down. It repackages the work into a new display format decided on by the committee and reduces the digital submission to the same status as a photograph of an artwork would hold when part of an on-screen slideshow. Thus, it would be better to use the screen as a resource for displaying any and every submission, rather than giving visitors the idea it's a true and artistic choice of the digital artist, when in fact it's a heavy compromise determined by the committee. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed reading or listening to my thoughts on this subject. I'm guessing you will, because this is what art is all about and why we love it. It's the ideas. If you don't like it, remember they're just ideas, so don't worry. Yours sincerely, Scott. Be good, my little Pukkos. Be good.